When you're looking for a solicitor to deal with your case, you don't just look for any solicitor, you look for the right solicitor. An expert who knows what he's doing can deal with your case the right way, achieving the best results. OBASEKI Solicitors has more than 100 years of specialist experience serving the local community in immigration law, property law, human rights legislation, civil and criminal litigation, family law, employment law, Sharia law, business law, maritime and commercial law, providing professional legal services globally in Africa, Asia and Europe. Be assured we'll be able to deal with your case the absolute right way with results. So, contact us today by phone on 020-7739-7549 or go online at www.legalpal.com.
Good evening. Welcome into the new year to Truth and Justice TV. Happy 2019 to you, 2019. Can you believe it? 2018 went by so fast. I can't believe that, we're into a new season, but thanks be to God. I hope you had a wonderful break. I'm glad to have you back with me. I've missed you all so much. So today we're going to be discussing the very difficult topic of abuse. And the reason why we're going to be discussing this is because it's much in the headlines, especially with the historic allegations of abuse that have been put forward against certain celebrities that are out there. The Me Too movement has galvanized some women to have confidence in reporting historical abuse. But it's not without controversy. People do doubt when you delay in reporting cases. But women can't always come forward when they're abused, neither can men. Sometimes the circumstance delays them. But today we're going to be going through abuse, the different types of sexual abuse that are criminal offences under the law, so that you can be aware when you notice it happening, or if things have happened to you, that you actually have confidence that what has happened to you is a crime. And then later on, we're going to be talking to my guest, who is Miss Clementine Ngawa, who is a pastor, but also a legally trained advisor who's working with OBASEKI solicitors. We're going to be talking about some of the barriers that are prevalent when you have challenges in getting legal advice and support when you have legal issues. So let's kick off straight away with issues of abuse. Now, when it comes down to sexual abuse, it's quite a taboo subject in our community. Sadly, people shy away from the issue, sometimes due to embarrassment, other times because they're not really sure how to handle it. It is a heavy topic. Number one, if you are dealing with children in any shape or form, you should be having a safeguarding policy and safeguarding training. But when it comes down to adults, adolescents, sometimes that training is not so clear. But it is important for you, if you are dealing with men and women, to have a policy in place that prevents sexual harassment and sexual abuse. It doesn't just apply to the workplace. It actually applies to community areas, community projects, areas that people actually congregate. You should have those types of policies in place, because people need to know who to report to, where to report, and who is that responsible person for taking down and writing the information. If in doubt, always report to the police. But if you're in a situation where you're not sure, it's always best to report in order to be safe. Do you understand? If you're not certain, report first, so that you actually cover your own back, especially if you are the responsible person. And the other thing is you have to record information. So yes, the Me Too movement kind of galvanized this, let me say, confidence in women reporting sexual abuse and rape cases. But it's not been without controversy. When you report historic allegations, it's more difficult to actually prove, and it's also more difficult for somebody to vindicate themselves if they're actually innocent. from committing the allegation or the alleged offence. So the first thing is really to try and report things in good time. Why? Because number one, gathering evidence is very important, especially in rape cases. When a woman or a man is violated, the sensitive evidence, so this is things like semen, sweat, all those things can be present on the skin or in the body for a duration. So the sooner they are gathered as evidence, the better. Also, things like bruises may appear later, especially on black skin. So you might have to go back and even photograph bruises when they come up, because they might not come up the first day. Second thing is really, you think about definitions. Okay, if somebody wasn't actually physically penetrated, is it still assault? Yes, it is. So that's another thing. Sometimes women shy away. They're already so embarrassed, or men so embarrassed at the fact that there was that level of intimate and sexual contact, that they don't feel confident in actually going forward and continuing to make the complaint. They just want to get it over and done with and move, close the chapter, forget about it. Whereas if you do that, that perpetrator might go on and abuse other people. So if we look at the definition of sexual assault, what is a sexual assault? A sexual assault is any time of sexual contact or behavior that occurs without a clear consent of the person that it's being done to. So even if somebody doesn't actually, let me say, as I say, go all the way, I'm trying to use language that people might be more comfortable with. If it's a form of intimate touching, it's still an assault if it's done without your consent. Okay, so the issue here is consent. And it covers a range of activities, obviously. It could be going all the way, forced penetration, molestation, fondling, touching, and attempted rape as well. So you have to really sort of realize that even though the lines might be blurred, once you're able to distinguish and explain what has happened to you, a police officer that's trained is who normally deals with you if you're in the UK or in a European or Western country. If this type of thing happens in less developed countries, sometimes there isn't as much or there isn't as good training with some of the officers, but that doesn't mean you should not report it. You still should go on and report. Then, if we think about some of the misconceptions, one thing I would say to you, sexual harassment is not just sex. So sometimes you might be having innuendos thrown at you constantly at work or where you congregate. Oh, look at her, the wolf whistles and other lewd comments that you're not giving consent to, you're not encouraging, but are being given to you. That is a form of harassment. So in order for harassment to be sexual, that doesn't mean that there has to be sex. It could also be verbal. It could also be in writing. It could be in, other forms. And it could even be with somebody leaving certain objects on your desk that have a sexual connotation. Do you know what I mean? Now, sometimes it's important to distinguish between sexualized violence and violence. So abuse, can be categorized. There are different categories of abuse. So if somebody actually just comes up and punches you, yeah, that's an assault. For it to then fall into a sexualized category, it might be because of further actions that follow or go with that type of assault. So whether it's words that are said alongside with it, or where the actual striking on your body takes place. So again, an assault can be sexualized, or violence, if I say it like that, violence can be sexualized in that way. Now, there are some myths that I want to kind of get rid of. So, sexual assault only happens when people are drunk. No, sexual assault can happen when people are stone sober and can be without, let me say, any provocation. Sometimes women are accused of seducing men or causing men to assault them. by the way they dress or the way they talk. Yes, if a woman is flirty, she might send out the wrong signals. But consent is consent. Unless you have somebody's permission to touch them intimately, you have no right to do so. You can't automatically assume because of how somebody is dressed or what they've said they want you to be intimate with them. It's absolutely wrong and unacceptable. A lot of times there is this victim blaming and victim shaming that takes place. And also culturally, you have these, let me say, phrases like the girl is spoiled, or the girl was spoiled, or the woman is loose. And so often, because of that labeling and wrong labeling, the person who has suffered the attack is not believed. All of a sudden, somebody just uses those words, even though they were not there, to try and victim shame. That is, again, is a myth. Just because somebody uses those words doesn't mean you should be prevented from making your report for assault. In short, you should be actively encouraged to do so. Other myths, another sad common misconception is if they didn't want it to happen, they should have fought back, they should have been physical. Sometimes, if your attacker threatens you with physical violence and you are overpowered, if you cannot fight back, if you are held in a position where you cannot actually, move yourself, then how can you fight back? Just because you have not been able to fight back doesn't mean you should blame yourself. Again, a perpetrator who is intent on attacking somebody, no matter how they fight, will actually go ahead and do the act. It's important that you do try to defend yourself. But if it comes to a situation where your life may be taken, realize that it's better to live in order to come and get your attacker, report them, see them convicted, than to die and for that perpetrator to get away with things. So yes, try to defend yourself. But in some situations, fighting is, unfortunately not going to stop the attacker. And we've seen that happen in various different rape situations. And I'll tell you a situation that's happening in France. I was actually part of a group of professionals that had to write to the French government last year because there were a series of cases where young girls were being groomed and statutorily raped. They're underage and they were being raped or engaged in sexual activity by men who were much older than them. Some even fell pregnant. The French government wanted to reduce the age of consent to 12, 13 following these convictions. The men were not convicted of statutory rape. Sadly, they were convicted of assault because they said there was not enough violence involved in the actual sexual assault. So statutory rape is there to protect young children, young minds who are impressionable. Why? Because it's meant to protect young women who are not of age to get involved in sexual relationships, who are not of age to consent. Because it's very easy to hang around a playground, see a vulnerable girl, offer to buy her shoes, offer to buy her a phone, give her money, or even a young boy and offer to, give them gifts and then say, come round the back or come in my car. Next thing, that child obviously feels indebted to you. Next thing, if it becomes a case of intimate touching, from intimate touching to full penetration, that child is coerced into that situation. And not only that, our children, by law and as a result of their age, need to be protected. It's, the civic duty to protect young children, especially from perpetrators, paedophiles, who know how to play this game and groom young minds into them being coerced to do acts that they want. Sometimes, sadly, these children are filmed, and not only do these perpetrators sell the film, but they also use it as a form of blackmail to make the child feel obligated to come back and do it again and again. Do it again, or I'm going to share this amongst your friends, that kind of sexting, texting culture that we have. Also, the passing of sexual material. And this could be of a child not necessarily engaging in sexual act, or a woman not necessarily engaging in a sexual act, but pictures of their intimate person. Passing of that material is also an offence. So sometimes I've seen myself, people passing things on WhatsApp that are completely inappropriate. If you get anything like that on your phone, delete. If it pertains to a child, report. Even if it pertains to an adult, report. Because that's the only way to stop such illegal acts. You know, it's very sad that in our community that we still have, again, a lot of these misconceptions, you know, and again, things like harassment. You'll sort of say, I feel this person's harassing me, this man keeps talking to me in an inappropriate way. And sometimes the response is, ah, but did he touch you? If he didn't touch you, leave it now. And again, harassment doesn't necessarily involve physical touching. So if you're being harassed, it could be, as I've said, by words. The fact that that physical is not there shouldn't again deter you. One of the things you can do as a victim of harassment is to keep a diary and try to keep a record. Evidence wins cases. And we've seen with the cuts in the police at the moment, often the CPS sadly don't always go full on with prosecutions. We've seen so many rape cases collapse and other cases, but again, I say that shouldn't deter you, but evidence and confidence wins cases. So try to keep record of what happens to you, photographs, just even in a daily, this happened at this time, he called or she called me this at this time, or she continued to send me emails even though I'd asked for it to stop. Try not to retaliate or become explosive in your language. Again, it's important that you're not seen to provoke the perpetrator. A perpetrator is a perpetrator. If they mean or intent on getting you, harassing you, they'll continue to do so. But try to monitor your language. Realize that a lot of these recordings will be used in a prosecution against the individual, so they're likely to be recorded. Some of the other things that I want to sort of, again, think about is really when it comes down to the act of rape, apart from the fact that there is the issue of consent, this crime is usually committed by a man on a woman. When it comes down to male rape, it is also one of these taboo areas that hardly ever talked about. But male rape does occur. And sadly, because of the appetite, sexual appetite in Europe, a lot of young boys are now being trafficked from Africa into Europe. We know about young girls being trafficked from Africa into Europe, but we don't always talk about the young boys because it is so taboo to talk about male sex or homosexual sex in our community. Why is it taboo? Because of our culture, that is number one. And then number two, because it's seen as so abhorrent, it's so shocking to so many when the issue is put before them. So they don't know how to handle it. They don't know how to deal with it. And sadly, that's why a lot of young boys are not reporting it. So again, if you are in a position where a young person or an adult discloses an issue of abuse or rape to you and you don't feel comfortable with it, refer them on. Refer them on to somebody who's equipped and trained to deal with them. So, you know, even if a person is, let's say, joking with you, trying to be flattering, you know, passing you compliments, and then it starts getting out of hand, it starts getting more and more offensive, this can be harassment. So you should feel confident, even if, you know, it started off innocent and progressed to be something that was a lot more sinister. You should feel confident in reporting it. Okay? Again, some of the misconceptions we've spoken about is, you know, provocative dressing. Again, if I know that there are some parts in certain countries in Africa, if you wear a miniskirt and you go outside, you are highly likely to be attacked. Not in the inner cities, but in the remote areas, especially in the north of Africa. You can go to certain places and you may be targeted because of what you wear. So you have to know about the customs where you go to. You can't sit down and think that you're going to a place like Dubai and you're not in a particular enclave and you're wearing a miniskirt. You're asking for trouble. So it's important equally for you to respect the law and the culture wherever you are in the world. As I've said, there are some towns that you may go to when you think you're in a cosmopolitan country. For example, I can only give an example like Nigeria or even Ghana, and you can get away with wearing a miniskirt or even a bikini on a beach. But if you go to certain areas that may be less tolerant in the north of those countries that have more of an Islamic dominance and where there is more of a practice of the Sharia law, and you think you're going to get away with wearing a miniskirt, no, you may be targeted. So extremely important for you to understand the culture and the laws of where you are. At this juncture, we're going to take a very short break. And when we come back, we'll have another look at one of the main elements of, let me say, sexual assault, which is grooming and the historic element. And in the last 15 minutes of the show, we will take your phone calls in case you have any questions about this very sensitive topic. So see you in just a moment.
When you're looking for a solicitor to deal with your case, you don't just look for any solicitor, you look for the right solicitor. An expert who knows what he's doing can deal with your case the right way, achieving the best results. OBASEKI Solicitors has more than 100 years of specialist experience serving the local community in immigration law, property law, human rights legislation, civil and criminal litigation, family law, employment law, Sharia law, business law, maritime and commercial law, providing professional legal services globally in Africa, Asia and Europe. Be assured we'll be able to deal with your case the absolute right way with results. So, contact us today by phone on 020-7739-7549 or go online at www.legalpal.com.
Welcome back to Truth and Justice TV. Today we're talking about the very sensitive topic of sexual assault. Yes, we've been spurred to do this topic by the different documentaries you've been seeing, Me Too movement, historic allegations of abuse, and trying to really look at the topic in a sensitive manner so that there's a greater understanding within the community as to what is sexual assault, what is rape, what is paedophilia? These terms, do you really know what they mean? What is grooming? So, as I've said, we'll open up the phone lines in the last 15 minutes. We have posted on our Facebook page numbers that you can contact if you've been affected or you want to get more information on this topic. So, I've been putting forward different scenarios, and one of the common situations that we find, especially with young girls, is that they get invited over to someone's home and the assault takes place in the person's home. So because they actually went there voluntarily, they feel that they cannot go on to report the rape or the sexual assault. Now, that is again a very big misconception. Even if you go voluntarily to somebody's residence or room, they still need consent from you to engage in sexual activity. You know that we had those situations that were presented, allegations against Harvey Weinstein. He invited me for a meeting. He invited me up to his hotel room. Then suddenly he was dressed and he went into the toilet and came back in a bathrobe and started touching me even though he put the contract on the table, things like that. The fact that you went there voluntarily does not mean that you have given somebody license to abuse you. It doesn't give them any actual right to do anything to you. The fact is, consent must be given. And if somebody has actually offered you drinks, you've had drinks, Even if you get tipsy, it's not an excuse. A woman who is completely inebriated cannot consent. So if somebody gives you excess alcohol or you've not controlled your alcohol, the fact that you cannot consent actually is not consent. So you have to actually be lucid enough to say, look, yeah, I agree to what's going on here. But if a woman is completely drunk, that doesn't mean you have the right to take advantage of her, or a man. I'm completely trying to make sure I keep this balanced, because a lot of men have had sexual abuse happen to them but not come forward. When all this has been going on over the weekend, a lot of talk and activity, and a lot of African men saying their first sexual encounters sometimes were in their home by their house helps. Their house helps used to come and abuse them when they were young, and that was their first sexual experiences. And that is, again, abuse. But because they were males, they didn't feel confident in reporting it. They even felt embarrassed to report it. And one of the most sensitive topics that we have touched on slightly is the issue of child rape and paedophilia. Sadly, there is such a taboo about it that when it does occur in certain institutions, we've seen the issues with the Catholic Church and the historic abuse allegations. The automatic issue of shame and embarrassment means that many children have not had justice, and many paedophiles have actually gotten away with awful, awful crimes. The first thing to do is for you to remember that you have to protect the child's interest and make sure that they are given immediate attention. When a child is penetrated, there is a series of issues. Apart from the physical damage to the body, there are serious emotional issues that can take place in damaging that child. So the child will need not just physical support, but will need emotional support and often therapeutical support. Because again, paedophiles are quite clever. They trick and groom the child into thinking that what they're doing is okay. So sometimes that child goes on to have issues of self-blame, guilt, and if unfortunately the paedophile is not caught, there is that fear that that's going to happen to them again. They're going to come and get them again. So the first priority is the child, and it's important that if the perpetrator is known, that the perpetrator is not assisted, you report these individuals. Those who sit down and say, oh, but I'm innocent, oh, but you're going to ruin my career, oh, you know how damaging this is, oh, that child is loose, that child is a devil, that child is possessed. No, all of that is distracting from the fact that the person has committed a heinous crime. So you must feel confident in reporting. Sometimes there are, again, very many misconceptions, but it's important for you to know that there are different classifications. There in the UK, there's classification of sexual assault of a child over 13 and under the age of 13, and there are different offences involving children who are 16. Again, a lot of these classification of offences are to try and look at the child's ability to let me say, comprehend as to what's going on and the reasoning as to how things might have taken place. Also, to have degrees of protection over the children given their different ages. But regardless, a crime is a crime is a crime. You shouldn't be thinking, oh, well, that teenager, I know she's out, I know, or he, I know that he's normally out there doing this and that. No, don't victim shame the child. Always note that you have to look at the adult. The first thing to do is to protect the child. One of the things that I'll do as a last thing on that particular topic is try and look at the misconception that paedophilia is a psychiatric disorder, or is it a mental health condition? A paedophilia is seen by some who are prolific paedophiliacs that are constantly attracted to children as a psychiatric disorder in which an adult or an adolescent experiences a primary exclusive sexual preference and attraction to children. So a paedophile can also be a man or a woman. Do not feel that women are exempt from committing paedophilic crimes or demonstrating paedophilic behavior. we've seen cases in the UK where women working in certain environments have been convicted after engaging in paedophilic acts with children in nurseries and other circumstances. So don't just assume that they're innocent just because they're a woman. No, a paedophile can be a man or a woman. So very important that you have checks with regards to those who are working in your environment. It does not mean that you can say, oh, I know them, they've worked in a nursery before, that they'll be all right around children. Sometimes paedophiles move around. As soon as they've finished with one child in one location, they move on to a new location to start grooming another child or group of children. One of the examples I'll give on that is football coaches. Last year there was a footballer who exposed a long-term paedophile that was in his 60s that had gone to so many different clubs where he had groomed boys and raped them and gone on to different clubs. And when the heat got much in one club, he'd move over to another club. But because the children were not talking and because they were boys, and because he had made it clear to them that, oh, if you do this, I'm going to make you a success. This is how men do things. None of the children spoke out. And even those who suspected him did not speak out. Oh, they felt, oh, he's a good coach. He's actually a good coach. He likes the boys. He loves the boys. He wouldn't do that. So there was, again, not the issue of looking at the children, but the issue of looking and protecting the adult, which was very, very wrong. To say that paedophilia is a moral issue, a moral failure, no, it's a crime, okay? Don't look at, oh, it was the devil. I think I was looking at some cases as I prepared for the program in Africa, and some of the excuses that were given by even pastors, well, it was the devil, I was possessed. No, it was a crime. It is a crime. It's not a moral failure at all. So going on from the issue of sexual offences and sexual assaults, I want to talk just briefly about grooming, because when I was doing the preparation, again, a lot of the responses that I had to some of the articles and things that I posted was the fact that many people in the community don't seem to be aware of what grooming is. Grooming is where an adult actually manipulates and coerces a child into sexual contact. And sometimes they can take their time, hang around playgrounds, take up roles as coaches on teams, and befriend the child. After befriending the child, it could then take different formats, offering gifts, offering money, sometimes even as simple as offering sweets. So becomes very, very difficult, because sometimes you see that person around, you think that they're just being friendly, just getting into conversation with your child is comfortable around them, and then before you know it, sexual contact and sexual activity is going on behind your back. Many people say, why doesn't the child speak out? And as I've tried to explain, the child is usually confused because they're a child. They're emotionally, even if they're pubescent, they're still not emotionally mature enough to handle sex and the concepts around relationships. That's why the law is there to protect them. So to sit down and victim shame a child, even if it's a child who has been introduced to sexual contact not by that predator, sometimes a child may have been molested when growing up, so is susceptible to a paedophile's attention, or susceptible to being re-victimized and abused because they've already slightly been conditioned and introduced or sexualized. But you cannot sit down and, as I say, blame the child for one reason or another. And again, don't just think it's exclusively girls, it is also boys. So we've dealt with that topic. Again, if you're affected, please feel free to email me, or feel free to give us a call and we can see how we can help you. Historic abuse, as I've said, is difficult to deal with, but not impossible, not impossible. So it's important that you're encouraged and supported to speak up, okay? Now I'm going to introduce my very special guest. Her name is Clementine Ngaya. Pronounce your surname.
Nanga.
Nga. When I look at how it's spelled, that's why I get to that. So, welcome to Truth and Justice TV.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Now, we've dealt with a very difficult topic.
Yes.
And for those who don't know you, please introduce yourself.
Hello. Would I say Happy New Year to all of you? Thank you. My name is Clementine Nanga.
Nyanga.
That is easier to say. I studied law, LLB, at Middlesex University. And now I'm with OBASEKI solicitors. Yes. This is very important for, I may say, our community, because I'm from French community. Bonjour.
Ça va.
Ça va
Bonjour.
bien.
Ça va bien.
Ça va bien, merci. And, you know, this is very important to talk about all those harassments. And I may briefly come back to what you say regarding the children. We got so many pedophiles in the community around us that people are not necessarily looking into that. And I will come to the grooming issue, because we got something that has been going on for the last few years, and I came across that. As Jennifer said, I'm a pastor as well. And this is very important because it's in the community, in the church community. And the way the pedophiles are doing is when they are talking to the children, especially those who are coming to the church, they are using them by giving them, like, offering them gift, like very expensive telephones, monies, taking them to McDonald's, calling them aunties or uncles. And when they bring them to sexual abuse, what they're letting them know is, look, don't talk to your parents. If you do, they will throw you away from the house. So we got those barriers of communication. So
They're very clever. Groomers
Yes.
will try to tell the child, oh, but if you tell your parents,
Yes.
they'll sell you're rotten, they'll throw you out.
Yeah.
This is, it's a sin. And especially, they know what tactics
Yeah.
to use.
And again, when they say that, they tell the children that your parents will not believe in you.
Yes.
And that is the big issue here.
You're a kid. Nobody's going to believe you.
Nobody.
If you tell them, nobody's going to believe you. I'm even going to tell them you're a liar. Look at you. You were even enjoying it. Look at you. Please.
And then I came across that, Jennifer. A young girl for 14 years talked to me, Pastor, look what dad and uncle has been doing to me. Then I spoke to the family. The next day, the child couldn't talk, because what they said to her, look, this is a shame for our family. Your dad will be arrested. And, I'm telling somebody out there, you have been a victim of abuse. Don't let it kill yourself. You have to speak out. You have to talk about it.
Do you think that many pastors are trained and equipped to report the families? Do you think that they're confident in reporting the families?
No, none at all. Because what they look at is not the families or the children's interests. They are looking after the ministers. I mean, they are...
The ministry, as
yes,
it is.
They
don't want to tarnish the
No,
ministry.
they don't. And they always bring it into the Bible. But when you go to the Bible, even the Bible
Does
that
not
condemn,
this at all.
And what did they say? Oh, let's we deal with that in the Bible's way.
In the biblical world, don't go to the police. Let's deal with it in church.
And then what I have been talking to the pastors, I think pastors should be trained, and talking to the government here, I think they have to look into that.
No, definitely.
Honestly,
we've offered churches safeguarding training, and believe me, apart from OBASEKI solicitors, we run NGOs, especially one called Professionals Against Gender-Based Violence, where we offer safeguarding training. We're accredited up to the European Union with regards to training, but pastors have to reach out and want it. I do believe that it should be made compulsory for places of worship, because paedophiles pray in those areas.
Yes.
Even when I posted something over the weekend, somebody replied in saying that look at the Quran, there was reference to Muhammad laying with a girl at the age of 9 after she had a period. And I was like, oh my goodness, how can you say that? How can you even try to qualify that?
Yes.
And that shows you that there are people out there that simply do not see how wrong and abhorrent this is within our community. So it's key we let you realize that these are criminal offences and they must be reported to the police.
Yeah, but they try to protect more the pedophile than the children.
This is
And,
my concern.
And the problem is that they are children now, but they will grown up.
Exactly.
They will grown up. So they will have that. So what I was talking to a pastor, I said, you are trying to stop everything now. But what will happen if this child one day she's 14 now and she will become 18? So if she calls the police, what will happen?
Number one, historic abuse. If you're in an institution that fails to protect you, that institution can be sued, even if it is historic or even current abuse. So pastors, you're in a position of responsibility. You have a duty to protect those in your congregation, and imams too. And what do you call the Jewish, as well as, you know, within the Jewish faith. It's important that all religious leaders are fully aware of the fact that you have a duty to protect those who come to your presence. Community leaders in your community centres, same applies to you. You do your CRB or your DBS check on your staff who have positions of responsibility, but you must have your policies in place to protect those who come into your institution, your organisation, that come on your trips with you. It's essential. Absolutely essential.
And the children, I think the family should have communication, listening to
the children. Talk to your children.
Yeah, because that, but here's, you know, when they are abused, they don't know who to turn to.
Your children, as I've said, do need, apart from the physical attention for protection against STDs, they then also need emotional support. And the families themselves may need therapeutic support. Can we go on to think about some of the issues as to why members of the Francophone community don't always access justice or don't always get legal help and support?
Well, we got, depend of the issue. If it's immigration, they can come back. When it's something to do with sexual,
they feel
it's a taboo,
It's a taboo,
real taboo, because you can't talk about it, especially when you are among men and they start talking about sex. Everybody is close. Oh my gosh, you are impolite. They are calling you name. And people feel, oh, I can't talk about it. What will happen to my marriage? Let me die with that. Let me shut up.
Really?
So we got the traditional, culture coming into that to stop people talking about whatever happened to them, and also the language barrier.
The language barrier, number one. Within my experience in servicing the Congolese Angolan community, one of the things I realized is the language barrier is a killer. I had a lady call me on the phone. I couldn't understand what she was saying. Her husband, who spoke some English, because I brought her into the country on a visa for him. When the husband came, and she called me 3 times, I was so frustrated. And then I got a call from the husband saying, are you in your office? I've got to come now. What they came to tell me was they had given evidence to the police on somebody hiding a gun in the garden next door. And the police were refusing to offer them protection. So she was livid because the person that hid the gun came and said to her, shh. So she was scared. She was there with her kids. So she called her husband, calling me. So having lawyers that speak the language is essential. So that's one of the reasons why we've engaged you, and to make sure that we have the French, the Portuguese in-house, and not only that, not just an interpreter, but legally qualified. It's important that, let me say, the community realize that in issues like that, you're not alone. These are things, gun crime, gang crime, trafficking. These are all things that are affecting all elements of our community. The African speaking, the Francophone speaking, the English speaking, the Caribbean, the Nigerian. It's just awful. So to think that one particular segment of the diaspora community is even so far from getting support because of language barriers is
Yes.
very sad.
And also they don't know anything. Most of people, they don't know about the law in this country.
So they don't know what their rights are.
Coming to integration problem, they stay where they are, better where
They are in the enclave of the
Yeah,
community, in the
yes,
bubble,
yeah,
and they don't, you know,
Yeah.
they don't know their rights.
Yeah.
They don't know sometimes when their, let's say, their benefit has stopped, what to do. If they've been sacked from work,
Well,
wrongful dismissal,
nobody- yes,
don't say
they
nothing.
don't know all that.
They don't know what to do.
And this is why solicitors, OBASEKI solicitors are here. I'm talking to special French community people. Look, I'm here, not only, there is no excuse, I think. No more excuse.
No more excuses.
Because in our office now, you come with French, whatever Lingala, Kikongo, Swahili, whatever language you're talking, speaking, your native language, you come, somebody is there
to help you.
to help. We are here
Portuguese
to
will
help.
be there to help you.
Yeah.
Now, I know sometimes things even like access to legal aid may be an issue, but there is legal aid in housing and family law. And so what we really want you to do is not let the problem become so overwhelming and so urgent, and that's when you come. Right now, I realize that a lot of people come when the problem is, when the house is
Yeah.
already on
As
fire.
you always say, 2 minutes
2
before-
minutes to
before-
ashes falling. So don't come in the middle of the problem. As soon as you identify that there's an issue or you're confused, feel free to come. You can book a free consultation.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it. You can book a free consultation. And if we're not able to help you, we'll refer you on. But sitting in silence now, as you say, no more excuses.
Yeah.
No more excuses. You might even be shy. Don't be shy. You can come in. We will actually make you feel comfortable, whatever your problem is. I always say to people, in 20 years of servicing my clients, helping them with problems, there's almost no situation I have not seen. So nothing's going to shock me. Nothing's going to surprise
Nothing
me.
will be new. Eh?
Nothing will be new. So you've got to feel comfortable. What are some of the common problems in the community, the Francophone community?
Housing
Housing.
and immigration.
Those are the
Those
two
two.
main.
And we come to the crime now because most of people has been, children stabbing,
So a lot of
using
affected
drugs.
by gang crime
Yes,
and
gang
drugs,
crime.
social
and,
ills, yeah.
Yes, but housing dies.
It's a very big one. And do you feel that's because, again, the integration issue, integration being a problem?
Yes.
Moving, obviously, there's that transition maybe as an asylum seeker or being a failed asylum seeker, moving from NAS to benefits, or maybe being dependent on somebody, then moving around the country. Maybe you live with family, then you're not living with family. So the issue of housing, maybe you're sofa surfing. How would you say you're not stable in Lingala?
Or Vandi Malamote.
And then also, how do you, one of the main issues I used to deal with back in the 90s more so than now, 90s and early 2000s, was trafficking. Girls who've been trafficked from Central Africa onto the European continent and then brought into the UK. So is there a common word for trafficking in Lingala?
Kobatama.
Kobatama.
Let me say that way.
So if you're
Kobomba.
affected, kabomba. So if you're affected by these issues, understand that there's help out there for you. You don't need to stay in silence. Many of the Central African girls don't have status or have been using borrowed passports. Their cousin or their sister or passport identity they bought in France,
Yes.
that they're using here. And because of the fact that passports are moving to biometric, time will soon be up. Again, we think about many people who maybe from the Francophone countries who are actually dependent on relatives who may have acquired EU status that are here, but have fallen out with the relatives.
Yeah.
The uncle brought them or auntie brought
they
them,
fall out,
and they
yeah.
fall out, so they're no longer there, and they don't have their 5 years is finished. They don't know what to do.
They became homeless.
Homeless.
I can't even say stateless because
Exactly.
they will not go back to wherever they come
Exactly.
from. But what I will say to somebody is watching us is that until you ask, you will not know.
Yeah, don't say silent.
Come forward. Because when you ask, then you will know whether you can get
Help
help
and what your rights are.
exactly legal aid or not.
Exactly.
Because some of people, when I talk to them, can you come to see us? The answer is that I don't have money.
But if you are homeless and you're underage, or you're homeless and you have issues, money is not going to be an issue, because a firm like ours has a housing legal aid contract. If it's a case of litigation, if we see the merits in your case, then we will come down to a fee arrangement with you. If it's family law and you're having issues with social services, legal aid is automatic. If it's not legal aid and it's private contact, your husband wants to take the child to Belgium, you don't want the child to go to Belgium, and it's a contact issue, you come in, we sort out a way that we can try and represent you, or you self-represent and make sure that you actually have a level of access to representation. A big problem for me, many women, especially women in abusive situations, not getting access to justice, again because of the language barrier.
Yes, and as I say, it's a taboo for them. So they
talk
need,
about,
you know,
especially
they need to
domestic
trust you in order to talk to you. So that is what I have been doing, coming close to the person, because to make sure that she can talk to you. So when you talk to the person, you tell him, "Don't worry, I'm here to help you." I think this is a long way to go.
So you think about trust. It's important for the client to
Trust, yeah.
And do you think that it's important for the client to understand the culture?
Yes.
Do you think they'll be more trusting when they understand the culture? I
Because
do find that, especially with a lot of my clients,
Yes.
well, even when they're Albanian, when they see that I understand the language and I understand the culture, they're
Yes.
more comfortable to open up and talk.
Yes, because the way, and that is what, the way we speak French in Congo is different from the French in France or Paris.
Yeah, classical French.
Yeah. So all that coming into that. This is why we say people should come and speak to us in their native language.
Yeah.
Make things easier.
Easier. You communicate better,
Yeah.
obviously, when it's easier for you to talk. When talking is a problem because it's a second language, or that you don't understand every word in that language, it can become problematic. So, what do people have to look forward to this year?
Before
we're going to
you
have
go to that, there is one question.
Yes.
They told me to ask you.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Are they welcome to OBASEKI solicitors?
Yes.
I reply to that one. I say yes. And the next question is, do we do no win, no fee cases?
We do no win, no fee cases. No win, no fee cases. Let me use an example of housing disrepair. If we see that you've got a level of disrepair in your property, and we see that we need to move very fast, and you don't qualify for legal aid, maybe you earn too much, we may take on such a case. If there's been a wrongful death or abuse by a public body, so that's by police or clinical negligence, we may come to a fee arrangement with you where you pay part of the fees and or part of the costs, but we pay the main cost in running the case.
Yeah.
So we do different levels of fee agreements with clients to make sure that they can access representation. Then I'll even give the example of historic abuse, just so that you negligent people and pastors and community leaders out there know that I will come for you if you don't put in protection for children and adults in your company. If we see that you were in an organization, institution, and you reported sexual abuse to the person in charge and they took no steps to protect you, especially if you're a child, then we can see that as a historic abuse case, and if there's evidence, then we may try to help you run the case with a fee agreement on a no-win, no-fee. Because it's important that you know that you have an obligation to protect people in your care. If you're a pastor or you're a imam or you are running any form of organization, even if it's a charity, you have a duty. You saw the cases with Oxfam and all these others that had not even a duty, that had a moral obligation to look after the children in their charge, and they were actually prostituting some of these children. Absolutely horrific and abhorrent. So yes, if somebody falls victim to an organization like that, then definitely I would look to seek justice for the victim always, because I'm so passionate about protecting the rights of women and girls and stopping violence against women and children, especially children. I'm absolutely passionate about it. It's our moral duty.
Yes.
As a community, it's one hand. No, it's a whole community that raises a child. It's everybody's duty. So unfortunately, we're coming to the end of the show now. I'm not sure that we had any calls come in, but two things that I need you to remember. Number one, if somebody doesn't give you consent, you have no right to touch them at all in a sexual manner, no matter what they're wearing, no matter what they've said to you, no matter if things start nice and you've approached them nicely, no matter if you're not violent, if you're not using aggression, you still have no right to touch them in that manner. Number two, grooming. We have to keep an eye on our children, male and female. We have an obligation to protect them from paedophiles or anybody who actually wants to harm them or force them or coerce them to engage in sexual activity. There are laws to protect them. It's an automatic offence if you engage in sexual activity with a person who is underage. It's called statutory rape. It's absolutely wrong for you to share sexual or not just sexual or material, but imagery of children or women or men that's of a sexual nature without their consent. You should not be passing these round in WhatsApp groups. You should not be passing them round in any shape or form. And you should not be having this material on the hard drives of your computers. Again, there were some ladies that were convicted, professional ladies who were convicted because they shared imagery of child porn.
Yeah.
And they were doing it, say, oh my gosh, look at this. And sadly, because they actually held it on their systems and passed it on, they were convicted. Even though the intention to do harm wasn't there, the intention was more of shock and gossip and passing around, sadly they were convicted. So please, bear these things in mind. We all have a duty to keep people safe. Thank you for joining us once again.
Thank you.
And we look forward to seeing you again on Truth and Justice TV. And as I always say to you, be good. And if you cannot be good, be very, very careful. Thank you. Bye-bye.
When you're looking for a solicitor to deal with your case, you don't just look for any solicitor, you look for the right solicitor. An expert who knows what he's doing can deal with your case the right way, achieving the best results. OBASEKI Solicitors has more than 100 years of specialist experience serving the local community in immigration law, property law, human rights legislation, civil and criminal litigation, family law, employment law, Sharia law, business law, maritime and commercial law, providing professional legal services globally in Africa, Asia and Europe. Be assured we'll be able to deal with your case the absolute right way with results. So, contact us today by phone on 020-7739-7549 or go online at www.legalpal.com.